94.4 in Nairobi, Mombasa 87.9. We're in Kisumu 102.5, 96.0 in Nakuru, 96.7 in Eldoret, Nyeri 90.9, Malindi 97.7, and we live stream this show everywhere across the globe on www.spicefm.co.ke. We also live stream the show on our social media handles, SpiceFM KE, Facebook, YouTube, and Twitter. Let's move the conversation now back to COVID-19 and the effects of COVID-19 to the economy. We have had conversations with the hospitality sector. We've had conversations with the agricultural sector, with the horticulture sector and floriculture sector, with the aviation industry, everybody else but media. So today is the day we're having a conversation about the impact of COVID-19 on the media industry. Of course, because media broadcast a lot of information. You've also seen the kind of effect that we've had in the media. The listed media companies have already issued their profit warnings. We have also seen in terms of staff cuts in the media industry. And this is not unique to the media, just like I've said. So to have the conversation with us on media, we'll have a Media Owners Association represented by the chairman of Radio Africa Group, that is Kiprono Kittony, who'll be joining us on the line. And in the studio this morning with us is the CEO of Standard Group PLC, Lyomu, and the president of the Kenya Editors Guild, Churchill Otieno. Thank you very much for joining us this morning, gentlemen. And of course, we know very well that being people who work in media, we didn't have to make you wake up early to get here. So this is just it's a normal stuff. So we're not going to thank you for waking up early to the studio and all those things.
Thank you for doing your job.
We do that with everybody. I'm going to start with you, Churchill. The Kenya Editors Guild over the weekend raised concern over the quality of journalism, especially because of what is happening in the job market in the media industry. A number of layoffs have been announced by several media houses. Even before COVID happened, there had been some warning that media houses are going to be laying off some staff because of tough business environment. And now with this COVID-19, this has been accelerated. And what the Kenya Editors Guild saw was quality of journalism being impacted, and you're raising concern over that, right? So what exactly is it that you are seeing from where you sit as the Kenya Editors Guild as the areas of concern?
Thank you, Eric. Happy to be here. On Sunday, the Editors Guild did release a statement to the nation. And the Guild takes the view that the business of journalism is not just a business for the investors, the shareholders, and the audiences. It is a business for the nation, that citizens need to bother and care what is happening in the media. It was very apparent to us that while there are fairly significant challenges and shifts, if you like, in the media, that reality is mostly only visible to those in the media. We felt it's time to robustly draw in the public, draw in the citizens with us, so that they can see the landscape for what it is. It occurred to us that the job losses not only is a manifestation of the struggles that the media corporations are going through, but it's also a reduction in the strength of the newsrooms. And thinner newsrooms definitely means that the public will be less served by journalists.
Yeah. And Orlando, what he's talking about is something that, you sit in that position where you have to make that decision that we have to go now into staff cuts. We've got to look at our operational costs. And in order for us to survive this wave, you've got to make that decision yourself as a CEO and say, this is the route to take. Among the immediate casualties, of course, is sisi watu wadogo. Right? So just looking at that and what he's raising, do you see the point that the Editors Guild is raising in terms of the quality being affected, the quality of the output of media houses?
Yeah, thanks. Let me start by saying the unique thing about media, because we are not in this alone. The whole country is going through this pandemic experience. If you look at other industries, they have the advantage that they can take certain intervention measures that are probably more drastic. Some organizations that can stock, that can accumulate stocks, can actually say, okay, produce, close, or shut down. And for the period you're shutting down, then you can keep your expenses as low as possible. Now, media cannot store news because we can't manufacture news in advance. And then we come and put it there and say, okay, now tomorrow, this is what you're going to dish out. That's the first unique situation about the industry we're in. Now, if you look at, say, hospitality, the hotels, the restaurants, again, it was easy for them to just make a call and say, okay, we are shutting down. People are going to go home. When we resume, we'll call them back. Now, in our situation, and I'm sure if you talk to any other media owner or media manager, we can't do that. Because how do you say, for instance, Spice FM, okay, Situation Room, you guys go home for 1 month. When things are better, we'll call you back. You kill the product.
True.
Almost instantly. So I think the unique thing about the media situation today is we are struggling to maintain a balance between keeping products that cannot be allowed to shut down, ensuring that those behind these products can be in gainful employment, and most importantly, to continue playing that essential role, which is to inform the public of what is happening. I think in a situation of a pandemic like this, media should not be essential because the government says so. Media is essential because people need to understand what is happening. The behavioral challenges we are seeing around can only be solved by proper communication of the right intervention measures. I mean, today you hear people talking about things like there's no corona. It's just a play by government to attract certain, donor funding. But in reality, until you start seeing somebody next to you drop dead, then you understand this thing is serious. So my take is that we have to be careful as a country how we manage which industries. There are certain industries which need to be handled differently from others. I know we've been called all sorts of names. Media has not been a darling of many, for good reasons, and maybe we'll get into that. But for now, I believe that it's important, whatever is done, ensure that media survives. I doubt it's about thriving now. It's about surviving and to ensure that the quality of journalism that is required doesn't go down during this period.
I think the two things that pop up right now, I mean, Orlando, just what you've just said, number one, ensure that media survives, and then ensure the quality. So who's responsible for those two things? Ensuring that media survives. Is there an external force then that is required to have that done? And then it would appear that ensuring that the quality is maintained seems like an internal thing that would need to be employed.
Yes, Drew. I mean, when I look at who should ensure media survives, remember, in any situation, you have external environment and internal environment. Internal environment is about management's ability to, react, to be able to sort of assess the risk and put on the table intervening measures that make sense. The external environment is less in the control of the managers of the business. Now, internally, as a manager, for instance, I wake up and say, what do I need to do for the business I run to continue running? And I think we decided to take certain measures. And as you know, we sent out communication to people and said, listen, things are getting tough. We foresee a very difficult couple of months coming forward. We propose these certain intervention measures so that we can all see ourselves cross this difficult period. So as far as that is concerned, it's 100% squarely at the table of the managers to make sure that the business is prepared to deal with the challenges that are out there. However, when you come now to the environment, remember, we do not operate in an environment that is sort of just a vacuum. We operate in an environment where regulation is determined by somebody, where policies in place are determined by other people, where the laws of the land affect how we do our business, where certain critical decisions can be made to ensure that we either survive or the opposite happens. Now, my take is, as managers, we can do the best we can to deal with the internal issues. However, if the policymakers do not wake up and realize that there are certain things that must be done to ensure various sectors in this country survive, then no matter how difficult we work as managers, that external environment shall have a big bearing on the outcome of our decisions. Yeah.
We're now joined on the line by the chairman of Radio Africa Group, Kiprono Kittony. Good morning, Kiprono.
Good morning. Good morning.
Thank you very much for joining us. Welcome to the Situation Room. This is Kenya's best radio station, Spice FM.
Thank you. I'd argue against that. But
you know what I've just done there. Okay. Having this conversation, Kiprono, and you've heard what Orlando has said, the two factors, the internal factors and the external factors. The internal is what the management can do to keep the business afloat, and the external factors in what the government policies would need to be put in as interventions by government. This also brings in the role of advocacy. I expect that what we've seen from the Kenyan Editors Guild in a statement calling for concerted efforts and on conversations is also something that we should be expecting from the Media Owners Association in terms of advocating for these policies or these interventions to be brought in by the government. Have you, as somebody who sits in the Media Owners Association, have you had this kind of talk?
First of all, let me start by saying I associate myself with what Orlando has said and what Macharia has also spoken about from the Editors Guild. And, media does not live in isolation. I mean, we are not in a vacuum. We are an integral part of global society. And, we are living in very historic and unprecedented times. I mean, the COVID crisis has brought very many challenges. But the truth of the matter is that media had been experiencing problems even before COVID. But now the headwinds that we are facing as investors, have largely created an existential crisis for media businesses. Now, I came across some research and from FIFA, and 54% unemployment in the country, rising from about 30% 2 months ago.
Yep.
94% reduction in household spend. 42% of our people living in fear of hunger. And many businesses and individuals losing income and losing their jobs is a real crisis for society. But however, we see the public continues to rely on the media for information, for up-to-date updates on a regular or even daily basis in terms of what they must do to stay alive during this very difficult and challenging time. Now, the media owners have actually contributed about 300 million shillings to the COVID response fund committee in terms of free advertising. This is over and above, well over 1 billion shillings if you can calculate the amount of airspace and airtime that's being used to educate the public. But you see, we must also deal with the elephant in the room. That is the convergence of technology, media, and telecommunications. I mean, that is also impacting greatly on our revenue sources because many businesses like Netflix are able to, disburse content without having the infrastructure that we have. I mean, they just find the content and disseminate it.
Yep.
What the Media Owners Association have done is they've come up with a raft of proposals and sent them to the Cabinet Secretary, Mr. Musheru. This includes tax breaks. This includes requesting the government to provide perhaps long-term funding through any of the multilateral agencies of between 5 and 7% interest over a 5 to 10 year period to enable many companies to actually create an environment, an ultra low cost environment. I personally have no doubt that we have to go to an ultra low cost model to survive. We either need to innovate our products, reduce our costs drastically, or we shall be out of business. The other thing that we have requested the government is to deal with the issue of pending bills. I mean, they have done a fairly good job in the recent past, but we still have well over 1 billion shillings in unpaid bills. We've also requested, for the print sector, that the government considers increasing the number of supplements that the GAA is placing in the national newspapers to make these businesses be able to stay afloat. Other suggestions that we've come up with include even waiving broadcast fees and maybe even complete tax breaks for the time being until we are through with this situation. Thank you.
How far have these conversations gone?
They are at a fairly advanced stage, and we expect that the government will come back to us very quickly. But in the meantime, the reality is, many of our traditional revenue sources from corporate are drying up. most corporates have taken a very defensive position in terms of spending.
Yep.
And one of the first things that always goes is advertising. So it is a reality that we face an existential crisis. I don't think today in Kenya there's any media house that can boast of making any profit.
COVID aside, Mr. Kittony, is it common for media houses to have emergency plans for situations that are unanticipated?
With specific respect to what? Can you be a bit more...
Well, with respect to any problem, for instance, no one foresaw COVID, yes, but a company can have a problem. Something may happen within the country that you hadn't anticipated. Do you have, let me just ask the question directly, do you have an emergency fund, COVID aside?
We do not have an emergency fund. I mean, most of these businesses operate, for profit. And the way that they derive their profits is making sure that they have revenue from their various sources that are larger than their cost base. And now the situation that we are faced with is that the revenues have dwindled, but our cost base remains largely the same. And even if we were to transition to a lower cost model, the labor law provides that you need to, make payouts to your personnel. Many media houses, I'm sure Orlando will bear this out, including the Standard Group, ourselves, the Nation Media Group, Royal Media, have got a very large establishment. I mean, we are providing a gainful employment to thousands of Kenyans. But with the new reality, of course, that has got to change. Obviously, businesses have to, save and prepare for a rainy day. But over the last 5 to 7 years, the environment has been extremely unpredictable, both the legal and the regulatory environment. The content space has also changed very drastically. And there is a very big need for innovation across the board by media houses. And I do agree that going into the future, we need to actually sit down and look at how we can find a safety net fund that can be able to, salvage these businesses at times such as this.
It's indeed true that, what Orlando and Kiprono are saying, this is not just about COVID, but even before COVID, we already were seeing a change in the business environment. Kiprono mentions the change in the regulatory environment as well, Churchill. Do you see and do you agree that that has contributed a lot to the kind of situation that the media industry finds itself in the country?
I agree entirely, and I dare add that, especially linking it back to the question on quality earlier, that the business of ensuring that there's quality coming out of media is not just a business for the media. Yeah, the consumers of media, the other stakeholders in media must take an interest and actually have a responsibility to look at it. Especially if you read the Constitution well, and you do understand that what we have in Kenya is what we call co-regulation, where the government and the industry come together to see how best to regulate that space. Depending on what policies and what laws are put there, diversity in media can be encouraged, and that diversity will then drive competition, positive competition, and many times when there's positive competition, that tends to push up quality of the product that comes out. At the Guild, we're also now saying that the key ingredient, the key input into that quality is the talent that goes into media. And we're beginning to ask ourselves, are our journalism schools producing the right talent for the kind of challenge that we're having to face today? And we're realizing that yes, there's a convention that we need to have there. Yeah, but ultimately, the responsibility of driving the policies and the legal landscape that we want is the media's. Yeah, because the people who best understand how media needs to operate in a manner so as to serve Kenyans are the practitioners. So even though the room needs a lot more people, the practitioners must lead that conversation. And
Are they leading that conversation? From where you sit, I mean, is Editors Guild, Union of Journalists, Media Owners Association, all these arms of practitioners, are they leading the conversation towards ensuring that there's a better operating environment?
I think there are attempts, but there's a huge room for improvement. For instance, when I look at our content today, there's a very small portion of that content that speaks to the reality of what media is going through today. Yet it's a terribly important question. Yeah, So the mere absence, mere lack of focus on that question, I think, is a self-inflicted wound that we need to deal with, and we need to deal with immediately so that we're able to draw in a much bigger group of people to participate.
I hear you say that our training institutions perhaps do not train the caliber of individuals that media houses could, should we say, benefit from. And yet, many media houses have training managers.
Yes.
Where is the ball dropped? Because you also mentioned that when you talk about quality, you're talking about the people who actually work in media houses. So, there's a training aspect from colleges. There's the aspect within media houses with training managers. So where is the ball dropped? Because I would assume that even when you have to let go of people, the standards will be maintained.
I'm aware that the Standard has an academy that trains journalists. The Nation has a media lab that trains journalists. And if you look at that keenly, it's actually these media houses reaching out to try and fill a gap that otherwise they wouldn't have needed to fill. Yeah. So I think there has been attempts. There has been very, very deliberate attempts and investment to trying to make sure that we bridge that gap and we get the quality of the people that we need. Yeah. But media houses are not training entities. Yeah. There are people in our economy, there are people in our society who are best suited to do this training. Yeah. And we must challenge them to shape up.
So what do people do with the labs and the training institutions? Just fine-tune the product that you get?
I guess that's what that's the opportunity that we have. Unless we make training our core business. It's not.
Then it appears the fine-tuning isn't really being very well executed.
Let me come in on that, and because it's something that I've taken note of. You see, when you look at media, let's go back to which is the dominant profession that drives media. It's journalism.
Yep.
I mean, we have all the support services that make media, the gears move around and the clock tick, but it's really journalism that drives media. So if we look at most professions in our country, let's just be very local. They tend to have a very clear training path. That means you go to school, maybe you get your diploma or certificate or degree. Then the next level, you'll find that you have to be a member of a certain professional body for most of these other training spaces. If you're an accountant, then you have to go through another rigorous process to become a certified public accountant. If you're a doctor or a dentist or anything in the medical field, there are all these bodies you have to join and be a member of. If you're an architect or an engineer, similarly. Now, what I've noticed we are struggling with in media is, which is this one body that we can say ensures all journalists have this continuous professional development, continuous education, that ensures that the standards are upheld to a certain degree, that looks at the environment and say, now we have to change the curriculum and you have to learn these other professional lessons to remain relevant. And I think that's the biggest challenge I see we are struggling with in media, because it's left to the individuals to define if they want to become better or not. Now, there's also the other element which is not mandatory in any profession, but is very critical, and this is the element of coaching and mentoring. I don't think any classroom education can make you a good professional. When you are in the field or when you are on your desk, working with more experienced people, and then they impart on you the knowledge, the experience, the lessons they've learned, that's a very critical part of any professional development. I think the challenges that we have in media have to start with where I said, do we have anybody that can come and say, what's the quality we must uphold? The art and craft of journalism, how far can we allow it to drop before somebody comes and says, no, you are teaching outdated skills?
Yep.
And for me, those are the challenges. And yes, as an organization, we are trying to bridge that gap. But think about how many thousands of students want to become journalists. I don't think it should be left to the media organizations to spend a lot of money trying to fine-tune these rough diamonds into fine-cut jewels.
True.
Yeah.
It's true.
Can I just weigh in on the
yes, go ahead, Kiprono.
Can I weigh in on the talent conversation?
Yes.
You know that the nature of business in media is fiercely competitive. And, you know, we have had many instances in the past where the industry has actually lost out because of this fierce competition that also breeds mistrust amongst the media houses. One such situation was on the digital signal carriage business, where the media industry failed to unite into one entity that could competitively bid and be the signal carrier for themselves.
Yeah.
And if we look at the whole issue of talent, I mean, because of the fact that we are relying on human resources that are talented, many public universities today have media degrees on offer, but then they don't actually churn out the standard of personnel that we are looking for in the industry. So there is actually a great need for an industry-led media academy. Instead of us operating in silos as the Nation Group, the Standard Group, Royal Media, Radio Africa, just to mention some of the leading media houses, it would make a lot of sense if we had one unified approach in this regard, where we have an academy that churns out the sort of personnel that we are looking for. The second thing that we are greatly lacking in is in research and development. And you know, I don't know whether you know that Silicon Valley, which today houses the largest tech companies, started out as a result of U.S. government-funded research. So research and development in our country is an area that also has not been in great focus at all. And I think there is a need for a closer collaboration between government and all the stakeholding groups in media to actually have research and development to see what it is that we can do to innovate our businesses to avoid them from disappearing into oblivion. So I do think that this is really the time that those conversations need to be had. This is the time that we need to see what is it that we need insofar as our ability to stay alive. We need to look at novel and new ways of funding our businesses, and you know, also just to find a way for a closer collaboration between ourselves and all the major stakeholding groups.
We are discussing the media industry this morning in the Situation Room. On the line with us is the chairman of Radio Africa Group, who's also a member of the Media Owners Association, Kiprono Kittony. In the studio is the president of the Kenya Editors Guild, Churchill Otieno, and the chief executive officer of the Standard Group PLC, Lyomu.
Now, if we're saying that a change needs to come about whereby professionalism needs to be at the forefront, where we're saying that this innovation that we talk about, so that people are learning not just on the job, but they come into a media house armed with everything that they need to churn out the best, isn't it time that this competition then be shelved a little bit and say, okay, this is what we need to do in order, because when the media is called bad, it's not one media house, it's the media in the country. When the media is said to be making steps, it is the media, it is not one media house. Isn't it about time where we put heads together and say, all right, we're not going to wait for the government to put together this body. It's not going to happen anytime soon, probably not in our lifetimes. However, isn't it about time now that say, okay, let's put our heads together and say that if we want to churn out this professionalism that we all seek, isn't it time that we say, let's come together and do something about it now, as opposed to waiting for policy to be established?
Put our heads together for what exactly?
If we are saying that we want to have people across media,
Yes.
who are armed with the professionalism that is lacking so many times, to bring out this,
So like putting together
this jewel that you talk about.
Single regulatory organization like ISPAC.
If we are waiting for that to
Engineers
be
Board.
done in government policy, it's not going to happen now.
I think that organization,
Exists.
that entity exists. It's only that the media is a slightly different kind of cake compared to the other professions.
Slightly.
Yeah. And I say that advisedly. If you read articles 33 to 35 keenly, what it tends to suggest is that the doors into the media must kind of be left open. Yes. So that you might not come with prescriptive standards, yeah, but you could find ways in which you persuade and you encourage and reward quality, so that most of the people go towards that. Why am I saying that? If you look at Look at what's happening in Tanzania, for example, where the government can wake up and shut down a media house, not for any other reason other than because of ideological standing,
Right.
because they don't think that media house is owned or is writing things that they believe in. That's a very risky aspect. Look at what our cartoonists do. Some of them really push the envelope to the edge. And our democracy needs that. Yeah, our democracy needs that we be able to sometimes tell people things that they would rather not hear. And sometimes these are fairly powerful people. So for that reason, it becomes a very tender space to negotiate. But as we sit today, training in media is a mandate vested in standards of training in media is a mandate vested in the Media Council of Kenya. We could have a conversation how that has been managed and how what else could be done around it. Indeed, in our statement, we did invite all the stakeholders in media to come together, to come together so that we can have this conversation and together agree which direction do we need to go, who do we need to talk to.
Churchill?
That's being planned now. We just issued the statement on Sunday.
So we have a Media Council of Kenya in existence, established by law, and this is what we are calling a co-regulation, where the media industry participates in the running of the Media Council of Kenya. Now, all these things that we are talking about here, and yet the media has a seat at the table of the Media Council of Kenya. Why aren't they happening at the Media Council of Kenya? Whose responsibility is it to make sure that we are pushing for better quality and better regulation and all that professional development of journalists through the Media Council of Kenya? Whose responsibility should that be?
Remember, the Media Council is a creation of government and the industry. And as it were, the only implement they have is the law as it exists today. If there's need to change that law, if there's need to change that policy, these stakeholders must again come together and say, guys, this is the reality of where we are. We think for us to be progressive, the following aspects need to change. For example, if for-profit media houses is an issue, just for argument's sake, then something must happen in law to encourage funding of journalism in a way other than through commercial ventures.
Yeah.
To make sure that these things still go on.
You asked about competition for talent. I think that would be more of what I'd be interested in. I think the competition comes out of the need for almost instant results. And you have to understand that we are running businesses. I think sometimes people forget that media organizations are businesses with a mandate from shareholders to get a certain level of returns. And if a manager is given their KPIs and, the KPIs say you must have a certain rating, a certain market share, and a certain level of revenues so that you can get a certain amount of profit, then you do what you think is important to achieve that mandate. And the competition for me is just the cutthroat nature of the industry, people trying to be the best and to outdo the other media houses. However, where I differ slightly, if we focus on only people who are good as the media houses, then where is the hope for the young and upcoming journalists? And I think we have a role as media organizations to train young journalists to become better journalists. I think, and I speak for the Standard, about 2 or 3 years ago, we did lose what people considered very prime talent. And I mean, no one wants to lose their best talent. We could have gone back into the market and done exactly the same musical chairs and raided another media house for their best talent. But what did we do? We took a different approach and said, let's take young people and train them to be the future stars. That is a very risky path to take because sometimes these young people do not inspire that natural confidence and you have to groom them and, but if you don't do it, there's going to be a vacuum at some point. So I say that for us to fight for this talent, we have to remember that this talent also has a shelf life. So if all media houses just want the best and the best are expiring after some time, then where will the future ones come from? So I think in our competitive space also, it's important that we try to bring out the next people. But I don't think I would begrudge any media house if they came for my best. It's the nature of the industry.
That's how things are.
Yeah.
Kiprono, coming to you, and you raised something there with the example of what happened during the digital migration, where media houses, media business owners were unable to come together at a table and agree this together, let's pitch and win this bid to be the transmitters of content. This is indicative of that kind of competition that's in the industry, which gets to a point where it becomes negative. So even now, when you're talking about media houses coming together to push for better quality in terms of training so that all of you can pick from the same pool. So the Standard Group has its own way of training. Nation Media Group has its own way of training. Radio Africa is training in its own way. What is it that needs to happen so that media owners, especially, because these are the owners of business, can look and say there are some things that are going to have benefit for all of us, and then we can compete after that? What is it that needs to happen to bring you people together?
Thank you. That's a very good question, and it's something that actually keeps me awake at night quite a bit. I happen to be the chairman of the Media Owners Association during that whole debate on the digital distribution. And it was very sad to see that we were unable to forge a common approach towards the issue. And as a result, you know that this actually ended up in the hands of Chinese investors who are today the carriers.
Yep.
And, you know, if we look at the industry today, and these are things that we must deal with ourselves even before we go to government. There's so many nonsensical things that we are doing as an industry. Let's look at the print industry, for example, and I'm sure Orlando will agree with me. I cannot, for the life of me, understand why in 2020 we haven't decided to have a common services company owned by the 3 or 4 major print companies. Why, if I may ask, would the Standard, the Star, the Nation, and the People all print their papers in Nairobi, use their own distribution mechanism separately to send vans across the country with exactly the same product? Many of these vehicles are not optimizing their cargo load, and the presses are all sitting in Nairobi. Why, for example, can't we have the Nation print in Nairobi, the Standard take their press to Mombasa, the Star takes their press to Western Kenya, and we distribute the content and ensure that we have a shorter distance to travel? That, you know, those sort of synergies can also be found in areas like distribution. It can be found in areas like, you know, having a common approach with regard to the search for talent through Media Academy. But do we do that? Of course we don't. I mean, and the reason we don't do that is because, you know, we are all in a fierce competition for the ad spend that is finite. The pot is only so large. So, you see, unless we also start to really have those deep conversations about what it is, what common approaches we can take that will reduce the cost of our doing business and give us a fighting chance for profitability, I think, you know, it's a situation where we either start to be innovative or we face the reality that many of these businesses might not be in existence in a few years' time.
Kiprono, you've talked about a model that happens in other spaces in other countries and seems to work out very well. And it seems like something that can be done when you just mention it. But I mean, like you said, also, there's something that's stopping the conversation from going on. And you often see that action comes as a result of conversations that take place. Now, in the space in which we are currently existing, is it not possible for these conversations to start having to, I mean, because once you say it, it sounds like a fantastic idea, and we've seen that it works in other places. So is there something beyond the need for competition that would stop these conversations from taking place?
Yes, there is something. I mean, that something is the reality that we could all perish if we don't start to have those conversations. And last weekend, I know that most of the major media owners had a meeting. They had a sit down and they agreed on very many issues. Agreeing on the issues is one thing, implementing is another. And Orlando, I think I challenge you because you were in that conversation. We really need to fast forward some of these conversations that we're having and the measures that we propose to take. We need to build a stronger mutual trust amongst the key players in the industry. We also need to avoid too much fragmentation. I mean, when was the last time, for example, and Churchill, I'd like to ask you this question, when was the last time there was a serious, even one-day discussion between the Editors Guild, the Media Council, and the media owners? I mean, why do we have to wait for, you know, government or any other third party to convene us? I think it's something that, it's conversations that we need ourselves to take a front line in terms of approaching those issues.
I'll take that last question.
Yeah,
and,
respond to that.
It's I think it's interesting. It should come up because Orlando here was with us in December when editors convened and various entities and media came together at the editors convention, and some of these questions did arise. And there is recognition amongst the different limbs of media that something needs to change, both from the structure of the industry, but more so on the content and how sometimes the business comes together to support the production of that content. I think there's that recognition. And even these conversations are driven by that awareness that we must pull a much bigger number of people to get into that room so that we, as a nation, we can then negotiate that position and agree that this is the direction we need to go. Because remember, for some of these things to change, we might need to involve government as the executive or parliament as a legislature. And to do that successfully, we must have some quality conversation. We must make sure that all of us have a fair and comparable understanding of what the challenge is and where we want to go. Yes.
Just to respond, or in addition to what Kiprono mentioned about different media houses coming together, it is indeed true that several media houses are trying to sit down and just say, how do we work together? I think during the days of plenty, it was normal for everyone to think they can stand on their own 2 feet, and the competitive spirit was at its probably highest level. But things had started changing even before the pandemic was declared. Let's be honest. The media industry was on a sort of a slippery slope, and I don't think you could slide upwards. It was all about going downwards. And if you look at demographic shifts, they were starting to affect how people are consuming our products. If you look at technological disruptions, it was affecting the market share. You see, most of us had a lot of investments in the traditional spaces. Then comes in digital disruption, and all of a sudden, young boys and girls are competing for you.
Yep. They
in that revenue
they
space.
become media
With the
houses.
channel on their own,
Exactly.
yeah.
And when you go to pitch, you find this tiny person seated alone, and probably they walk away with the money. And those are the realities of what is facing us now. If you cannot influence your revenues, as Kiprono said, then it boils down to your costs. But remember, costs have a certain limit after which the business starts falling apart. And I think what we can do now is to come together as media houses, eliminate the wastage. I mean, as I said, all the printing presses are packed in Nairobi. These vehicles are going up country, maybe 30% capacity. The rest of it is just oxygen you're transporting from Nairobi to wherever you're going.
Yeah.
And we are realizing this fact, and
I
you're
wish
saying,
you could sell the oxygen.
let's come together. If it is transport, how do we fuel these vehicles and share the costs? Printing, we are starting to say, if you want to print the paper, how best can we do this? So that, we have very state-of-the-art printers, among the media players, but they're operating as, say, 3 hours a day, max 4 hours a day.
Good Lord.
Out of 24 hours.
Yeah.
So in terms of capacity, you can see also what's happening. So I agree with what Kiprono said, and as the team lead of the standard side, I'm very committed to ensuring that we come together with the others and try and sort our problems internally. Remember, I said there's the internal and the external. If we can bring down our cost to a level where we can be profitable at very low revenue levels, then that works for the business.
Good that you brought up the issue of technological disruptions. The media industry in Kenya has been accused by many observers of just sleeping and waiting to continue selling the newspaper while the world has moved into digital. Now, I know that there's a lot of movement towards digital in the media houses. Churchill Otieno is the head of digital in Nation Media Group. We have a whole department that you've set up, Orlando, in Standard Group, headed by a managing editor looking at digital. Same thing is happening with you, Kiprono, with digital. But there are those that are saying, guys, you're trying to catch up with the curve. It moved a long time ago, and you're still stuck at a point where you're still trying to sell your paper on a digital platform as opposed to selling content on digital.
I agree with you 100%. I wish you could attend our management meetings, because then you'll come and be my advocate here. It's true, we are quite behind the curve. Unfortunately, I wish we were in the middle of this curve, because then maybe we'd be able to catch up faster. You see, when technology came and disrupted our space, most media organizations saw translating the paper into a PDF format as digital.
Yeah.
And we focused on distributing this paper, and we said, okay, we've gone digital. And our digital was just distributing the paper until we were taught that other people can take the same paper and distribute it for free. So I do agree that we need to do more than just take the paper, because it's no longer about the paper, it's about the content. And in the digital space, you have to realize that the game is played completely different. A few years ago, I attended a seminar that was very eye-opening. And this is something that we can't run away from. When you move from the traditional space to digital, the multipliers change. Now, what happened in the music industry? There's a time you could buy the vinyl things, then you move to the tapes, and then you finally move to the CDs. Now, what you may not know is that when the compact discs were in the market, the amount of money the value chain produced for one CD, it took about 600,000 to 700,000 downloads of music to make the same amount of money, right? Now, we moved from downloads, now we are in streams. People are streaming. The number, I remember being mentioned that you need about 2 million streams to make the amount of money that used to be made from one
CD.
On CD.
And I think that's the same thing that's happening in our industry. A full page ad in the paper, I don't know how many digital ads you'll need. I need to find the multiplier, but you need so many digital ads to just recoup the amount you'd have made from one
Full
page ad.
Yeah.
So despite the fact that we are trying our best, I think the challenge is media houses are these sort of gigantic monoliths that have a lot of people. Look at the Standard Group, almost 1,000 direct employees, another about 400 indirect employees. Now, how do you ensure you survive when a digital ad gives you probably, a few dollars? Yeah, you need so much of this to be able to continue operating the same. From where I sit, our organizational structures will have to change. We have to start becoming leaner. We have to bring in the right people. I still am a strong believer that the technological advancements and whatever media has to be done has to be journalism-led. Today, I see a lot of what we are trying to do being led by non-journalists. But remember, if you have to be a winner in content, what we need is the editorial people are the ones who have to come to the table with the innovation, with the ideas that will transform journalism, because it still goes back to content. And if we can't get it right at the product level, it doesn't matter how many other innovative ideas we come with as management, we will struggle. So it is a challenge, and it's one that we can't run away from.
Orlando, maybe I should just add something. I mean, we are living in what they call COVID times. And we are told that the symptoms of COVID are difficulty in breathing, high temperature, and general body ache.
Yep.
I think the media is actually suffering from COVID. Because the whole industry now is gasping for air.
Yep.
And, we need to actually literally, like the rest of the world is doing, find a vaccine that will see us through. And one of the things that I just wanted to, pen out by saying is in 2018, we passed the Computer Misuse and Cybercrimes Act. And right now, one of the biggest threats to media is actually citizen journalism. I mean, where everybody is a journalist on a social media platform. And this has led to a very big problem around the whole issue of fake news, libels, and slander. And again, we need to really, work closely with the judiciary to see to it that we have a robust legal and regulatory environment to actually safeguard the general public from some of the problems that we've seen social media presents to us. So I am confident that if we all put our heads together, we can actually find a way to get us out of the COVID situation that we are in.
Let's close the conversation by bringing the issue back home to what's happening right now. The Nation Media Group started layoffs yesterday. We saw MediaMax laid off, Radio Africa. I'm sure there's something in the pipeline. Standard Group, I don't have to ask. There's something in the pipeline. I mean, you already started by saying this is something that's happening to us. The humane side of it, though, is what very many are raising questions with. When it has to happen this way. I mean, yes, you've got to cut your costs. You've got to let people go. But how you do it is also raising a concern. sending SMSs in the middle of the night or calling people in the middle of the night, come tomorrow for your letter. What do you say about that, Orlando?
Okay, I don't want to speak for the whole industry when it comes to that, because the shoe pinches the wearer. And if I start commenting about other media houses, I think I'll be speaking out of turn. But when you look at what's happening, it's a case of, how do I put this so that it makes sense? It's a case of, if the ship is going down and you only have so many lifeboats, how do you make the decision who goes down with the ship and who takes the lifeboats? And I think that's the argument you can have around the humane aspect of sending people home, because I don't think there'll ever be a humane way of telling somebody you're jobless.
Right.
I mean, we can try and sugarcoat it, but the reality is, and I've done this before, when you talk to that young person and they face you and you tell them, I'm sorry, this is your letter. If you see the emotions they go through, if you see some of them even start telling you their history and their problems, and you have to deal with that as a manager. Do you block out the feelings? Do you just, become this sort of mind block kind of person? You have no feelings. There's no human way. Unfortunately, and I always tell people, that's the distasteful part of leadership. You have to do things that will not always make you feel happy. If you don't do those things, the ship goes down. And you want to make sure that you save as many people as possible. So, unfortunately, a few might have to be sacrificed for the larger good to happen. So, my take is organizations should be a bit more professional about it. That's the only thing I can say. It's not really about being humane, it's being professional. Why call somebody in the middle of the night? I mean, is it something you're scared to do? No. Just face the reality, address people like human beings, tell them the truth, and explain why you are not the other person. Because you might be helping these people who are leaving when they go out and start looking for other jobs. Because if it was about performance and you don't tell them, then they'll not take that intervening time to improve their skills. So for me, it's how it's done. It's about the how, and I would detach the emotions to it. I would remove this whole talk that you can be human about. I don't think you can be human.
Actually, I wish to differ with you. You can. And whereas the buck stops with the CEO, this is squarely in the HR department. Squarely. This is their job. It is their task to ensure that what you're discussing here is understood. It is hoped that their training will have equipped them to be able to inform you, the CEO, to say, this is how we are going to do it. Churchill, what do you think?
Absolutely, because many times when these retrenchments happen, there's usually a warning. There's time to plan for it and assess fairly comprehensively how to handle it. My biggest battle with the way we've done it is that almost everybody has left out the audience in doing that. You hire Eric here, you hire Ndu, and every single day they're talking to our ears for years. Over time, we develop a relationship with them. Then one morning, they're just not there. Nobody tells you where this fellow went. Did he die? What happened? Yeah? Worse is TV, because you not only hear, but you actually see.
Yeah.
You see them in your most intimate space, your own living room. Some of us have TVs in our bedroom. We see these people in our bedrooms. Then one evening, they're just not there. Nobody's telling you where they've gone. So I think our attitude must always remember that there's an audience that we must involve in almost every single decision we make in media, because the business of media is a public one. Yeah, the entities that drive media could be private entities, could be private businesses, but the business that they do is a very, very public one. And I think we must find ways to involve the audience in all this. Yeah.
Gentlemen, 1 hour is a very short time. We've come to the end of the hour. So I'm going to give each of you a moment to give your closing remarks, and I'll start with you, Churchill.
The space must be reimagined. The editors have stepped forward, and we believe that the owners and the various other, the correspondents, the union, the regulator, even the government will join us at the table, and that we'll find ways to bring in views from the public, to find a new direction and new ways to drive media so that we have a media that is thriving, that is diverse, but more importantly, that takes care of the public interest.
Thank you very much. Kiprono?
All I'll say is thank you very much for this very important conversation, and let's just endeavor to stay safe. This is a very challenging time, not just for media, but for all of us as human beings globally. So thank you for introducing this conversation. I look forward to participating in more in the future.
Asante sana. Olanda.
For me, I'll try and close on a different note and say that media is very critical, not because we want to be profitable as individual organizations, but you have to think of the bigger picture. I think today we have a lot of content producers in this country who are aspiring to become, production houses, musicians. A lot of people rely on media for their survival and for their thriving. I think when we are talking about what can government do about media, let's not just look at our headlines. Let's not just look at the individual media houses, but remember that if media does not exist, all these content producers will have no platform to practice what they are doing. So it's critical that the role of media should not just be narrowed down to what the papers say or what the TV say, but to the value chain and the whole ecosystem that media sustains. And I think that's what we need to fight to defend. Otherwise, if we don't do that, then we'll think we are just affecting the media houses, but in reality, there'll be a bigger impact to the economy.
Profound words. Thank you very much, Orlando Lyomu, CEO of Standard Group PLC, Churchill Otieno, the president of the Kenya Editors Guild, and Kiprono Kittony, chairman of Radio Africa Group. Gentlemen, as we conclude the show, listen to today's proverb from C.T. Muga.
Today's proverb comes from Uganda. If those with horns cannot, what about those without?
Say again.
If those with horns cannot manage, what about those without?
Self-explanatory, isn't it?